Hey, thank you guys for joining us for our LPC Coffee and Collaboration. My name is Jennifer Scheich, and I am the editor of Farm Journal's Pork magazine. We're super excited today to welcome three legends in livestock photography, and they're going to talk to us today about pro photo tips from the farm to the show ring. I don't know about you, but I love carrying my camera around on the farm, and I'm hardly ever not with it at the show ring. And so it's fun as a mom to try to do my best. But there's such a difference between what I'm cranking out and what these experts are. And so I'm excited today to learn some of their secrets and advice that they have to kind of help those photos be the best that they can be. And so I encourage you guys today, if this is your first time joining us for a Coffee and Collaboration, take note that there's a chat bubble at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Please feel free to ask your questions throughout the morning. We will try to get to those to get to all of them at the end if we can. But please be putting those down, because we really want this to be a conversation with you guys at the end. But we are going to turn it over to these gals to go ahead and walk us through some of their tips first to kind of get the conversation started. I'm excited to welcome Megan Blankenship. She's with Next Level Images, and Linde Sutherly with Linde's Livestock Photos, and Pearl Walthall with Pearl's Pics Photography. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to them and be quiet and let them tell us a little bit about their business and some of their tips. So thank you guys so much for joining us. This will be recorded, so if your friends didn't get a chance to get on, you can share it later. Thanks again.
All right, Pearl, go ahead if you want to get started.
Well, there's a lot that we can talk about with taking pictures in the picture pen. To begin with, I kind of like to have a picture pen that's at least 100 feet long and 50 feet wide. I like to choose an area, if at all possible. You don't really know what you're going into, so when you get a new customer, you ask them, what is your background? Which way are your slopes going? Because I like to have a slope that's going from left to right, where they're kind of going up a nice gentle slope. If you can see some of my pictures here on the website, that's the direction they're going. And I don't mind photographing cattle going right or left. It's really up to the magazine. If the magazine flips your photo, if you're photographing to the right and the magazine flips your photo, or if you're photographing the animal facing to the left, and the magazine flips it in the direction that I photograph my cattle. For example, I always want the front end at least 6 inches away from me, farther than the hindquarters, because that will make your shoulders and your front end look a little bit smaller, a little bit cleaner, your hindquarters just a little bit heavier, your flank just a little bit deeper. Now, when you flip that photo, you're going to get the opposite look. So you really want to work with your publications and make sure that if you're photographing your cattle to the left, that this is going to be okay. Otherwise, your animal is going to look distorted. Once I get the picture pen, I try not to have a lot of distracting background. You don't want a lot in the background where people are focusing on what's behind the animal instead of the animal. So the least amount of background is better. If not, if you have to deal with that, make sure your animal is popping off of that background and the background is blurred. And you can do that with different types of lenses. Your longer zoom lens, I have an 80 to 300, I have a 70 to 200. Some of these lenses will help you with distorting the background and making that animal pop and come closer to you. Now, I also like to have 2 people in the picture pen with me. This isn't always the case. Sometimes I have too much help and sometimes I don't have enough help. But if you have somebody that's very calm, you want somebody in the picture pen that's very calm, very easygoing, and someone that can read cattle. Because when the cattle are walking, the person behind that the animal always turns its head and watches the person behind him. So you have to know, you have to keep that animal in all of its shoulders and the back and the hips all have to stop at the right angle. So the person following is very important in his position in terms of where he is and directing that animal to go forward. And then, of course, you have to have a very good person in the front getting its attention and keeping that attention and trying to stop the animal in that perfect position. Now, some of the cattle that you see on my screen, some of those are off the halter, some of those are on the halter. And then once we get, let's say, for example, I'm doing something on the halter. Let's go to the bull that's in the top left-hand corner. I like to do bulls in late afternoon. This bull right here, his picture was taken in Virginia. And it was later in the fall. The later, depending on what part of the United States you are, is where that sun is and how high that sun is and how low that sun is. I generally always like to take the pictures of my bulls and my donor cows in the late afternoon so that that sun is low and that you get the whole bull illuminated, and especially on his testicles. If you're photographing for bull studs, they want to see the testicles and they want to see a lot of light on those. And a lot of times when I prepare the bulls, and in a lot of situations when I go to the bull studs, I will clip the bulls and get them ready for photographing. We also put oil on the testicles to try to bring them, just to make them look a little bit bigger, just a little bit fuller, just to try to get them illuminating. Now you can see the difference. Like if you go to the bull over here in the right-hand corner, it'd be the third one down from the Hereford. You can see that there's a little bit of a yellow cast, and that's because it was taken in the fall, in the winter actually. So the sun, the illumination of the color of that sun in the winter months is much different than the summer months. So you have to do a lot of correction with your lighting in terms of your settings on your camera to get the right light on your animals. Now, if you're doing a white animal, like this white park over here, I did at a bull stud, your settings are going to be completely different than it is with a black bull like the one in front of him, or like the Hereford bull. The Hereford bull is a little bit harder because you want to be able to bring out that red color, but you don't want to wash out the white on his face. You want detail. Always remember, if you can't see the detail, then you're either too light or too dark on your cattle. You always want to see detail. Now, when we go down to this Highland bull here in obviously the winter months, this was taken in New Hampshire. Your sun is totally different in the winter. And what I like to do is I like to photograph those bulls in the winter months in the snow in the morning. I like for that sun to hit the snow and reflect up on the bull, and that's generally around 10 o'clock in the morning, depending on, once again, what part of the United States you're at and where the height of that sun is. But in the eastern states, when I photograph in the wintertime, 10 o'clock is about the perfect time to get that sun to hit that snow and reflect up on the bulls, and you get the same type of lighting as you would at 5 o'clock in Missouri. So those are all things to take in consideration. I like to have good equipment to use, because that really helps with your detail. And I use a Nikon D5 and zoom lenses. And a lot of times, if you're in a picture pen with an animal that's not broke, you can't get in the pen with him because he's coming at you. So you have to be prepared to have different size lenses with you. Sometimes I get to a situation where it's narrow. Then I have to put on my backdrop lens, which is a 20-70. So be prepared for any situation, any kind of lighting. Be flexible. Don't get to a farm and expect everything to be perfect. Expect that you're going to have to try to make things work. If I'm going to a new place, I get there early because I want to check out the situation. that person may not have been correct that this is a morning pen or it's an afternoon pen. So you always want to be prepared because you want to take good pictures. You don't want to leave not feeling satisfied that you got the best picture for that person that you possibly could. So always go prepared. Be prepared if you think you're going to have to stay overnight, and go back and do it again the next morning. Just always try to do the best job for your customers that you possibly can with the right kind of lighting. Always make sure you have help with you. Always ask questions. Always ask as many questions as to what kind of situation you're getting into as you can, and help that person prepare to get you the best possible pictures there are. And then when you're going to video, make sure you have a substantial tripod to put your camera on with a swivel top on it so that it can go with the animals, because a lot of times the different terrain, you don't have a nice flat area to go. You're on different terrain, and you want that camera on that tripod to be able to follow that animal and make it look very, very smooth. And that's what I do. If you look at some of these bulls I have, some of them are very, very correct and sound. Those are easy to set up. The ones that aren't correct, that maybe are too straight in their shoulders, that maybe they're too short in their hips, those are the ones that you really, really have to work at. As a photographer, it's your job to make those animals look correct in those pictures. And you have to know structure on cattle. And I think whether you do the backdrops or whether you're doing candids in the show ring, you have to know structure. And I think all three of us are adamant on agreeing with that. You have to know structure on animals before you can correctly get them set up in the manner that they need to be. Okay, any questions?
Awesome. That's great, Pearl. Jennifer, do you want us to answer any questions here as we go along, or do you want us to wait till the end?
You know, just go ahead and let's wait to the end and give people a little bit of time. I don't see any questions quite yet, so
Okay.
keep rolling. But don't
All right.
forget to ask questions, folks.
Okay. Megan, do you want us to go ahead on?
Sure. That works for me. Let me get over to my share screen here. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Blankenship with Next Level Images. I do a lot of all the different kinds of photography, but I'm going to talk about ring shots specifically today and what we kind of look for when we're out there doing that. This is a photo that I've got pulled up first. If you can all see, this is a dairy cow that was being selected, and I think it gives us an idea of what we're looking for when we're out there in the ring and how we have to kind of anticipate what's going to happen. One of the first things that you do, like Pearl talked about, you have to be prepared, you have to have good equipment, and you have to kind of get a feel for your ring. We always try, when we're going to a new event, we try to make sure we get around to all the different show rings and check out the lighting and kind of get our camera settings somewhere where we're comfortable with them as a starting point, because every different ring is different. And so this applies to any type of photography. Anywhere you go, you're going to have to start off by figuring out the basics of what you want your shutter speed at, what you need your ISO at, what you need your aperture at, what you want your white balance to be. And once you get all those variables, you can just kind of roll around from there and make those adjustments quickly for moments like this one that you see here. So as far as like a good starting point, when we're shooting these, we want the subject to be the main focus. So we often shoot low, which helps to kind of blur out anything in the background, and that kind of gives you a different angle, different perspective. But the main reason we shoot low for a lot of these is because you can cut out a lot of the people standing behind you, or kind of make it so that there's not as much clutter going on in the background, because you can't, like with a picture pen, you can change the background, but with this, you have the background that's there. You can't move the subject to a different location. You have to go with what it is. So we try to do the best we can to shoot in an angle that will minimize background distraction. But the other thing we do is adjust our aperture to make sure that the animal, the exhibitor, the main point of the photo is in focus and the background is blurred out some. So good equipment makes a difference with that, obviously, and then being able to get that aperture down to, sometimes we'll shoot around 2.8. When you're doing shots like this where you want the whole animal in there, you need to remember to bump it up a little bit and compensate for the lighting and kind of adjust your shutter speed and ISO accordingly. So for images where you decide, that you're about to get a photo that needs the whole animal, you make those adjustments to include enough aperture to allow the animal to be in focus and the person to be in focus. And then you also want to think about adjusting your shutter speed. If the person is in motion, your shutter speed needs to be higher in order to compensate for that. If you're doing something where all the animals are still, you can kind of drop that shutter speed and not worry so much about that motion blurring it. But so for this image, you can still see his arm is slightly, the judge's arm is slightly out of focus and a little bit soft, but everything else we managed to get sharp. And what we really want to focus on in the ring, there's so much happening, but for the exhibitor, for the owner of that animal, what they want is them to be the main point of focus. So we've cropped it in tight. I've kept anything else out of the shot possible and tried to make sure that it was just the animal looking as good as possible. I found an angle that would be flattering for the cow and that would get the reaction, the judge, all of those things. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of variables. Let's see if we've got another photo. Oops, sorry, share another one here with you guys. Especially if you're shooting a junior show, if you're a parent shooting. Oh, did it not switch? Hold on. Let's try that one more time. Let's go over to this one. All right, are we all seeing?
Yeah, you're good.
There we go, the little one, sorry. But this photo kind of gives you an idea. I'm not sure why I'm not getting to see everything that I'm trying to see. Again, what we've done here is avoid any background distraction. This was a full show ring. There was a lot happening in here. I was down low so that I was shooting up into the lights. If you observe that that's the kind of setting that you have where there's a lot of bright, beautiful light in the background like that, then you can really angle your camera and your lens to get the most interesting, most attractive background possible. And then all you see, it's almost 3D effect when you can do that, where the little girl and the heifer are really the main focus, that's the first thing you see. This is the kind, as a parent, this is the shot that I shoot for. And I think to myself, what would I want when I'm framing these photos in the show ring? That is the number one thing I tell anybody that's taking ring shots that hasn't before. Take the photo that you personally would want to have yourself, that you would buy of your child. Look for things like the eyes up. Obviously, we don't want the children to always be looking at us, but if you catch a moment like this where, I managed to get her actual eyes looking in my direction, the heifer's ears are up. These are unique shots that don't happen on a regular basis, that the parent doesn't have access to. So if we're trying to really capture moments in the show ring setting, that's the kind of thing you want to look for. Anything that really will make you as a parent or as just a person who might have someone out there in the show ring, or if it was you personally, the shot that would really speak to you and make you want to hold on to that memory forever. So that's the kind of thing. We're just framing the little girl and the heifer here. So let's see, I've got some other ones. And again, the blur here, I've got it very high aperture, and I've done everything I can to make sure that that is the main focus of this. And then the other thing that we really like to focus on is emotion. Anytime that you can find a shot that captures that real raw emotion. So again, it's anticipation. It's knowing your setting, knowing what's about to happen, being very present in the moment and moving around a lot to get to those shots. Again, we're low so that there's not a lot. There's a whole nother show happening in the other ring, but you crop in tight. You kind of avoid all of that clutter. And you look for just those special moments, and you get lucky when the heifer's ears are up. You can't always control that, but a lot of it is just being super aware and being able to control those settings to quickly make adjustments for, this one, we could have sharpened it up just a tiny bit too, but when you're in the moment, sometimes even if it's not 100% perfect, we'll save those photos because it means something. It's definitely sharing an exact memory here of how this little boy felt when he was selected. He won the show. That's why he's so emotional here. He's not sad for any other reasons, but it's a lot of anticipation, a lot of adjustments based on everything that you are seeing going on and knowing what's happening. Like Pearl said, being aware of the animals so that you're kind of knowing where to go in the ring, following the judge and saying, this is what he's been picking. This is where we're going to go. That's how you anticipate those shots. So it's not just a matter of like popping around the show ring and getting different shots. It's paying attention and anticipating different things as well. So, and this next shot is something totally different. I just wanted to have an example in here of making quick adjustments for shutter speed. So I don't do a lot of poultry shows, but I had the opportunity to do a few. And this was an example of the bird was standing totally still and then started to flap its wings like this. And you leave a lot of your settings alone, but shutter speed is one of my favorite things to adjust in the show ring to make sure that you capture photos with this one. If I hadn't changed the shutter speed, would have been very blurry. So I rolled the shutter speed up quickly and made it so that we could catch this bird actually in motion and still have all the background blurred out. It was in the middle of a crowded, busy barn, but you would never know that. And so it's just I think I'm just kind of hammering home that idea that you have to be aware of what's going on around you. You have to kind of crop in tight. You have to watch your lighting, and you have to be able to change your settings and make sure that those exposures adjust based on what you're trying to capture in the moment. So those are just, I think I have one more that I was going to share. One more. The walking shots. If this one popping up now? Yeah. Walking shots can be another tricky one to do. So I thought this was a good one to share. It's not 100% how I like the walking shots to be, but a lot of people struggle with those. I know it's really hard to do. When the animal and the child are moving at the same time, or the animal exhibitor are moving at the same time, you kind of want to watch the pace and the gait and see if you can get their legs in the least awkward moment possible. And if you're going to do a full body shot like that, get the whole body. Sometimes we'll have newer, younger photographers that tend to crop them at an awkward angle. If you cut off at the ankles or you cut off a wrist, we try to make sure that either you have the whole body, the whole leg, or you frame it so that you get like the head and neck of the animal and everything from the waist up of the child or exhibitor, and just watch for awkward cropping so that you don't end up with, part of a limb there and part of it not there. It just kind of detracts from the quality of the photo. But again, this is another great example, I think, of trying to stay low so that you avoid background clutter, getting them in the main focus, capturing emotion, and just being aware of where the action is happening and getting in the right place at the right time. So I guess that's a basic overview of what ring shot photography entails. There's obviously a lot of details that go along with the camera and all of the settings, but that's just an overview. So I guess if that's any questions yet, or if we want to wait till the end, like she said.
Awesome. I will continue on here and talk a little bit about backdrop photos. All right. Can we see that okay? Megan, are we good?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, so it goes right along with, I don't want to keep repeating what the other ladies have said. I absolutely agree completely with just knowing those details, knowing what's going on around you. At the backdrop, there is a lot of emotion sometimes, especially after folks have either won or maybe not won. And getting the champion photos are awesome and fun, and you absolutely want to get the very best photo that you can. Those folks have worked, as you all know, tremendously hard to get to where they are, and they absolutely deserve every moment and all of our attention to get those details just perfect and get that perfect picture for them. That's what we're trying to do. That's what our goal is, to make that animal look the best that it possibly can, because those folks have worked so hard to get there to the backdrop and win that award. However, on the same token, I guess that the flip side of that is those folks that maybe those kiddos haven't got that grand champion banner before, but they are just as important of getting that that photo. Of spending our time maybe of a photo that's their family and they're really proud of whatever ribbon, whether that the queen was there holding that ribbon or not. We need to take the time to make sure we get that great photo for every kid that's participating in the show. So that's what I always strive to do, and sure encourage all of the folks that help us to do the same thing, whether they've won or they're last in their class. It doesn't matter to us. We're absolutely there to get the best photos we can of every kid. or every exhibitor. So with details, as far as, you know, when you do have 20 or 30 people in a backdrop that you have to fit in there, and getting all those folks in and that you can see them well. And I always try to remind folks, if you can't see me, I can't see you. So if you're hiding behind the heifer's pole, you know, I can't see, you can't see me, I can't see your face either. So we try to, you know, as we get people placed up there in the backdrop before we even bring the calf in, to try to make sure we have everyone where we would like them before we even begin working on the animal. And, you know, because Grandma is just as important to have in that picture, and she's just as proud as those folks in the picture as the kid on the halter. So you try to, and sometimes it's tough, and you know, it's, if the animals aren't acting right, or it's got to go quicker than you would like. And sometimes the best picture that we end up using for a magazine, maybe you can't see, you know, every single person just perfectly, but we sure try. And you know, I think that's just part of the whole attitude, is that if folks know in the backdrop that you are giving your all and you're giving 110% and you're trying your best, they absolutely appreciate that, and that you are being respectful as you're doing it, and asking them for to move that foot maybe an inch, or to try again, let's circle one more time. And you know, or people have to catch flights, or people are in a hurry, or it's been a long day, or they're hot, or they're tired, and the cattle don't act good. There are just so many factors when you're standing there to keep a smile on your face and be pleasant and keep working with the folks and working with the animals to get them to their to look their best. So always try to keep that in mind, that you know, there are a lot of emotions while folks are up there and they're excited, but yet you don't want to rush through anything and then look back and go, oh, I didn't get a great picture of that one, or I wish I could have got that one better. You just don't ever want to have that feeling. You always want to know that you did your very, very best to make that calf look their best. So as far as details on setting up the backdrop, and you know, some shows, of course, provide a backdrop or provide an area to take pictures at, and other ones we take our own backdrops, or you know, it's just so many different scenarios, whether they're tall enough or wide enough to provide enough space, especially when you have large groups of people. But you also want to keep in mind the colors, like the girls were talking earlier of for your settings. There's not, they vary some, but I guess it's probably the least amount of variable. Once you get those settings set there at the backdrop, they do vary, of course, as different colored cattle come up to the backdrop, so you don't blow those out. And some of us shoot with a flash, some shoot without a flash. That's personal preference and probably lighting dependent in the arena that you're in. And as far as, you know, having a little bit of rise there with the base that you're given. Some are mulch, some are shavings, some are dirt, and you have to try to build your own something out of nothing. Or put some kind of platform or something underneath, which there's always challenges there, and then you have to try to get that animal to stop on that exact location. Hence, Iowa State Fair is a little tricky sometimes with getting that accomplished, but that's just part of our job, and that's what we have to do. And you know, there's also people walking behind the backdrop that could cause one to scare or move, or people stick their head through the backdrop because they can walk right behind it. There's just a lot of different funny variables that we could get into that people don't even realize, like that maybe happened while you were taking that picture or something. But anyways, just having a great team and trying to have a good attitude is always so wonderful and helpful at the backdrop. Having somebody to help get those cattle in there just right, helping to get them set just right, just the way you would like to see them. And, you know, getting the attention getters are just so crucial, because when they're up there on a halter, so you just, like Pearl said, you have to have people that know how to read cattle to know whether they're doing enough or not enough, or that calf's ready to jump out of their skin, or they're a deadhead and they are just need woke up. So that person is just so impactful to the photo of whether that calf really just pops their head up and just makes the picture, or yeah, that looks nice. So there's a different level there for me personally on who is helping you at the backdrop. But you like they said, you could talk for hours about these things, so I won't ramble on anymore, but I will certainly go into any more detail that anyone would like, or any of us will. So I will stop there and open that up for questions, Jennifer.
Thank you, guys. That was awesome. I am looking here to see if anybody's got any questions. I guess to get one thing I thought was interesting that you brought up, Pearl, and that you all backed up as well, is that if you can't see structure, it's hard to get those shots. And that's one of the things too, like nothing like two old livestock judging kiddos being married and trying to take pictures of just their kids. I mean, there's nothing simple about anything I try to take a picture of with their kids. They get severely analyzed. And we've spent a lot of time evaluating livestock. So not everybody comes from kind of a judging background, but maybe just has a really good eye. So how have you developed your eye for structure? And what are ways that people could do that and learn that if that's maybe not the background they came from?
You're talking to me?
I'm talking to anybody.
Oh.
Jump in. Whoever wants to start. Pearl, why don't you start?
I will start. My background has been cattle. I've been showing cattle since I was 9 years old. And I've been feeding them. I've been breeding them. I've been fitting them. I've been showing them. I've been photographing them. And when you're doing all of that, you have to know structure in order to clip them, to fit them. When you're feeding them, you know, feeding is an art of how you're going to put that weight on. And if you're feeding animals for the county fair or Denver, you're going to feed them differently. You're going to clip them differently. So you have to know the structure on your animals for everything that you do. And I also judge cattle, and I know the other two girls do also. And so I know a lot of times I'll be taking pictures of cattle and someone will say, well, I really didn't like that animal until you got it set up. And I said, well, that's our job, is to bring out the best in each one of those animals. Each animal will bring something good. I try to find something good in every animal that I look at. So if it's a little too front, it's too straight in its front end. Well, it's my job to make those angles look as good as possible. Now, I'm not a magician, I'm a photographer, and that's what I keep telling everybody. There's only so much I can do. But then also on the hips, if they're a little bit short strided, I try to get that hip to look like it's just a little bit longer. And then I'll turn those angles to try to make that animal look deeper. You do everything you can with your angles, and also lighting has something to do with it. Lighting is the same thing with fitting and photography. If you want to cover something up and you don't want that to be brought out, make that darker. If you want it highlighted, make it lighter. You do that with everything with your animals when you're fitting or you're showing, or it's all of these different processes all come together in terms of photography, showing, fitting, breeding. Just spending a lot of time with cattle and structure. It's our job as photographers to bring out the best in each one of those animals.
I 100% agree with what Pearl said, and I think, like Jennifer said, when you grow up with it, it's something that you instinctively have developed over the years and being around the show ring. And I think it's unique to us backdrop photographers that, like Pearl said, when they walk up there to the backdrop, we're evaluating every single one of them. I drive my husband crazy telling him about all the cattle I saw all day long, or goats or lambs or whatever it is I'm picturing. But I analyze every one. I can remember most of them and tell you a lot about them afterwards, because that's our job and that's our passion. And it's, you know, Jennifer, you asked how people who didn't come from that background would know or be able to learn that. And it's not a magic thing by any stretch. It's not easy. We all know it took years to develop that knowledge. It took actually being there. Like, I spent my morning sorting cows and looking at them again. So I see cows every day. I see cows in their natural setting. And then again, when they come to that backdrop or when they're in the show ring, and you know, you make a lot of judgment calls when you're taking ring shots about, I'll take a picture and I'll want to kind of delete it because it's not the best angle of the animal, or it's not, you know, we can't manipulate the situation in the ring like we can kind of try to at the backdrop. So you got to make some judgment calls occasionally and just leave stuff for the memory. But a lot of the photos we take in the ring are for marketing purposes as well. Like those great ring shots from good angles can sell cattle and market a program just as much as a backdrop photo or an on-farm photo can. So we're still looking at and judging them out there. And if you're trying to learn, that's where it starts. Just watch and listen and pay attention. And after a few backdrop photos, you'll start to realize that not every animal is capable of doing the same pose. It's not one size fits all by any stretch. And I pick on steers a lot because I can remember some specific incidents where my ear getter or helper was trying to set up the front legs of an animal. And I'm sure you ladies can relate. And you ask them to pull the front leg in. You're like, no, that actually doesn't physically happen. So you just have to be aware of what the limitations are. You have to be aware, like Pearl said, of how to maneuver them, and balance is a big thing. Just touching a foot can shift a balance around to change the entire perspective of an animal. So once you really immerse yourself in it, and I think that's the only way to learn it, is a lot of immersion, being around people who can teach you. I have been blessed with a lot of wonderful people in my life that have taught me, Linde and Pearl being two of them, that have helped me to see those animals and move them in the right way. Because just being able to look at one and say, oh, that one looks good in this way, doesn't mean it's going to walk up on the backdrop and do that. Changing those little tiny things, and not everyone can do it. It's a tricky job. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of practice and knowledge of the animal. Once you get your camera settings right, that's only maybe 20% of the battle, maybe.
Exactly.
There's so many other variables. So it's not something you can learn overnight. Those who grow up in it, those who immerse themselves in it, who live it day in and day out, like Pearl said, that's where you really develop the ability to see them and put them together up there and take the best picture possible of them. So unfortunately, there's no magic cure for that. It's just a lot of experience as far as I can say. I don't know if anybody else has other insight, but that's my feelings on the topic.
Well, one thing I would add to that, when I started photographing goats, I started going to shows and watched the judging and listening to the terminology of what the judge was saying about that animal, and then asking knowledgeable goat people more and more. The more you learn about the subject, the better you're going to become a photographer with that subject, whether you're doing senior pictures, whether you're doing weddings, or whether you're doing livestock. You have to know your subject. And so I'm still learning more and more about goats in terms of what the breeders want to see, so that I can become a better photographer with goats. So I go to shows and I judge right along with the judges, and I listen to what they're saying. Now, just like cattle judges, they don't all agree. There's the breeding goats, and then there's the steer type goats. But regardless, you have to learn about your subject to become a good photographer.
I agree. You have to be passionate about it. You have to want to learn, and you have to be aware of how it changes. Like I've taken pig photos over the years, and I'm by no means an expert in that area. And I like to always recognize what I don't know and defer to the people who know more and try to learn. And that's what, when I've done some of the big Texas pig shows, the people there will kind of point you in the direction of what they want. And what they wanted 5 years ago can be a little bit different, or what one breeder wants can be a little different from another breeder. So it's a lot of, just like Pearl said, you pay attention. I listen to the judge every set of reasons that's being given in the show ring. So if I'm out there, I'm either agreeing mentally or disagreeing, but either way, I'm listening and learning and picking up on new things every single time. It's a privilege to be able to be out there and do that, because you learn so very much and you stay very current, and that's super helpful in doing any of this. But I'm seeing some other questions over there.
I'm going to scooch us on just to make sure we get to all of these, but I think those were excellent points. Linde, why don't you start this next one? How do you decide when to use a flash versus changing a camera setting when you're in a lower light situation?
Sure. So, well, it varies, and it varies on what you're comfortable with your settings on your camera. So the comfort level for me personally at a backdrop is almost always to have a flash, just because I like the way that it lights up that calf. But it varies a little bit too if it's a paint show versus a non-paint show. Sometimes that factors into that decision making, or how well somebody can paint, I should say, at a paint show, or how well they can't, because that flash absolutely brings that to light very quickly. Even if it looks black to us as we're standing there, we'll quickly find out that they did not apply enough layers in the correct order to make that look correct. So then we get to try to help that slightly with our technology, which we won't probably get into too much of that today, but just to touch on that a little bit, I'm sure all the three of us would agree that Photoshop is a tool, but we certainly rely on our expertise in capturing the image in the original state. So as far as the flash, and you ladies can sure chime in here, and because I would say Pearl probably has even more experience without shooting with the flash than I do at a backdrop situation. Always in a ring shot situation, not almost always, I would say we always defer to no flash and using natural light. It always seems to be more appealing. But I'll leave you two to discuss that even in more detail.
Well, I'll go because I don't use a flash, and you two generally do use a flash, and there's benefits in both using flash. There's times when if I don't have the correct lighting and I have a light right above me and the top's illuminated and the bottom's not, yeah, a flash probably would have been the best thing to use in that, for instance. But I don't, and I used to always use a flash, always used a flash. Now, your cameras keep getting better and better with low light and low light situations. So I keep pushing and pushing on my camera to get the most light that I can get without distorting the picture and the animal. I like natural lighting, I always have, but I used to use a flash all the time. And what I didn't like was that I got shadows underneath it. Everybody complained about the shadows under their throats. But with the new cameras and the new flashes, you're not seeing that as much. So there's really benefits to both. If you know how to use your flash, it's great. It's great to use those flashes at the backdrop. I have been so far removed from flashes anymore that it would take me a while to get back using one and to be using it correctly. You have to be, I know Megan helped me last year at the Angus Junior Nationals, and she said, do you want me not to use your flash? And I said, I want you to be comfortable with what you're doing. So she knew that she could do the best job possible for us by using her flash. I didn't use a flash. And I think either situation, as long as you know how to use your camera and use your flash, I think either one is good. If you're adept with both, I'm not anymore. That would be great. Go ahead, you two.
I have found a compromise in between. Like, and as Pearl said, the biggest problem with the flash is the shadows. So if you can use a better camera and less flash, but still have the flash. So I've gotten in the habit of bumping up my ISO and lowering the flash to somewhere where I find a happy medium so that the shadow isn't as terrible. If you're lucky enough to be doing red and white cattle or white cattle, it's kind of easier, thankfully, because you don't have that. But with black cattle, if you can compensate and find a situation where you can go in between. But as far as like what she said, if you're talking about ring shots for flash photography, or I'm not exactly sure where your situation is with the lower light, but a lot of the cameras now, you can get really, really high ISO and still have good quality. And if you can get away with natural light, and like I said, in the ring shot, I've only had one ring in the really late at night where I would have preferred to have a flash, but it just isn't a very good idea because you can scare cattle and kids. It's distracting. It's not something I want to do. So for the most part, every other situation, you can compensate enough with your settings within a camera that's good enough. You can get away with not using that flash. But like both ladies said, it's a personal preference thing for the most part, especially at a backdrop. So that's what I have.
All right, moving on to our next question. Heather says she's mostly an ag landscape photographer, but she wants photography? What's the best way to get started?
I would say, just as somebody who we get a lot of those inquiries, is to reach out to people who are already doing it and try to find some opportunities to intern, to work with them, to get some experience, and to learning is the biggest thing. Just I think of so many people who I have learned from over the years, and I still do. That's the biggest thing you can do, is just to get out there and learn from as many people as possible and gain that experience. And, you know, it doesn't, if you have availability and a passion for it and you develop some skills, there's plenty of work out there. That's for sure. So if you're interested, reach out to any of us, reach out to anyone that you admire, who you would like to learn from and be involved with. And I would say it wouldn't take very long before you were finding some opportunities to get into the ring and take some pictures.
That's great, Megan. I've got a question for Pearl now. Pearl, do you let the customer see photos the day of shooting? Or what if they want multiple retakes? What's your policy to keep customers happy but keep your sanity too?
The customer is always right. If the customer wants to see the pictures, I'll show them right there on my camera, and I'll tell them what, you know, if the background needs to be changed or something needs to be done. Yes, I'll let them look at the pictures if they want to look at the pictures. Some of them don't. They just, you know, whatever. I pick 99.5% of the time, I pick out the photo that I think is the best for that animal, structurally, lighting, anything that will make that animal look as good as it possibly can in every aspect. But yeah, I'll have some that want to look at them, and yeah, I let them look at them. It's like I said, the customer is always right, whether I agree or not.
Linde, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or would you like to take the next question?
Oh, I would agree, Pearl, that absolutely. The customer is always right at the backdrop or in the ring, anywhere. And just like on ring shots, it kind of goes with that, I guess, is, you know, just because that calf doesn't look perfect or to look great, that kid has worked really hard at it, and those folks, their parents are still really proud of them. So it's okay. Like Megan was saying, yeah, we might delete that because, eat this, that. But yeah, I would, definitely encourage to keep those, because sometimes you don't get another shot of the kid. Something happens, or, the class is over and they're gone. I shouldn't have deleted that. So, but yeah, the customer, you always want to make them happy for sure. That's who you always want to remember, who you're selling your product to. For sure, and keep that in mind as you're taking the pictures, is definitely very important. That to go on to that question for ring shots, what is your ratio of profile shots versus creative or close-ups of the exhibitors? That I would say was probably a personal preference from photography firm to photography firm. My personal preference is that I ask my photographers to get a photo of every child that's out there exhibiting, and we try to get a profile shot and then a close-up headshot for those moms and dads, and to have a nice profile photo of them. So basically 2, and then whatever they have time for after that, have at it. Is be creative, get magazine type shots, get anything you can get that way. So I definitely encourage them to try to get pictures of everyone, because the moment you don't get a picture of someone, that's the one that's going to have said, why didn't you get a picture of my kid? So it's challenging. It's very challenging to do, but there are other photographers who might have a different view on that as well. They may only photograph kids that they have requests from, that that parents have said, hey, I want pictures of my kid, and if they didn't request them, they're not going to take pictures of everyone. So it definitely varies. That's just the way I prefer to do it for my business, but it is definitely a personal preference in whatever your business, however you've structured that to for your customers. So if you, the two of you have other thoughts on that.
Well, I'm going to totally agree with you. When my candid photographers go into the ring, they have a plan. One's going to work this end, one's going to work that end. Each exhibitor gets their picture taken, and then they start over, and they at least get 3 pictures of each exhibitor. That's minimum. And then they start going and looking for the unique pictures to try to get. But every exhibitor that goes in the ring gets a picture. My photographers have a plan, how they're going to do it, how they're going to work that ring, where they're going to stand. They know where each other are at all times. And sometimes you'll go to a ring and you'll see 2 photographers stand beside each other getting the same shot. Well, you're not using your photographers as well as you can if you don't have a plan when you go into that ring. And then I'm going to go back real quick to about showing customers pictures. You've got to realize in some of those customers' minds, that's a national champion standing in front of them, and that's what they want to see their picture look like, and it's not. So in their mind, it's a certain animal, and you know it's not. So when they see the picture, it doesn't always look like in their mind is how they want it. So you do it again. So you just please the customer in every way you can. There's some customers that are what I call barn blind. And then there's others that are very realistic. Say, wow, I didn't think it was going to take that good a picture. So you have every kind of customer. You just please your customers always, no matter what. I'll be quiet now.
Well, if that is it, I'm scanning to make sure I didn't miss anything. We're over our time, but we felt like it was worth it because you guys had such great information to share. We really appreciate it. It's lots of fun to have you join us for LPC Coffee and Collaboration. And I just want to give a big shout out to Rock and K Productions. We're so grateful that they believe in this opportunity to bring our LPC members together all throughout the year. Little did we know how nice this would be for us with some of our events and activities being canceled. So it's just great to see some faces and read some names out there. Please join us for our next chat. We're going to take July off, and we're going to resume on August 26th at 10 a.m. And right now we're looking at the topic of selling in a virtual world. So we might have a little bit more of an emphasis on sales for that one. Again, don't hesitate to share your ideas with us on future topics. And thank you so much for joining us, Linde and Pearl and Megan. You guys did a great job, and we'll be sure to share this on social for others to see too.